Hi gang, welcome back to the Honoriest Latina Ever. Yesterday we were talking about the shooter that shot up a bunch of school kids, and everybody was blaming the guns, and nobody possibly could blame the state workers that failed to do their jobs. I want to give you an example of incompetent state workers. I mean, they make the police sitting out in the parking lot twiddling their thumbs look like nothing. Anyway, I come from the state of Oregon. It was very liberal back there, and for the time that I was out there, I did a lot of community service, a ton of community service. And when I was out there, I was running for office, and I was also serving Tillamook County as a CASA, court-appointed special advocate for abused kids. And what I saw in my short time there was so appalling that it would make you guys cringe. They really had no business doing what they were doing. They placed the kids in jeopardy. They had a lot of like puppets out there that weren't really advocating for the kids. And the parents that were in desperate need were not getting the services that they needed. For example, if you had a meth addict and she was pregnant, it was okay for her to abuse her fetus while she was pregnant, really totally fuck up an unborn child. We couldn't touch that, or we couldn't treat her while she was pregnant. But then we could take away the kid if we found some meth in her system after the baby was born. But no testing while she was pregnant. So no rights to the fetus that was being injured while it was being developed, because that fetus didn't count as a child. I really had a hard time with that, because knowing that the life at the very beginning stages is so precious and so important. But there was this wonderful lady that grew up in a horrible environment. She was adopted, like many kids, like this boy that did all the harm to those kids, adopted by people that the state approved. You know, they approve a lot of bad parents. For example, there was a woman who absolutely did this for a living. What people do is they don't want to work, so they take in a bunch of foster kids, and then they sit on their ass and do nothing and get paid for it. And then they neglect the kids. Okay, so the kids go from one neglected home to being housed in an environment where there's just shit on the floor. It's messy. It's dirty. I went to this place where the girls were living, and of course we kept the kids from the real grandmother because she had a pool, and the pool was too close to the house. But at the same time, it was okay to let these little girls walk around a farmyard where there was a pond, and there was about 3 feet of water, and in this pond there was a 2x4 going across this body of water, and they were walking across unattended. Also, they were walking around barefoot in a barn with broken glass and a lot of junk and stray cats everywhere. And they said this was typically normal, that they would just run around the farm unattended. Needless to say that the 4-year-old could speak very well, and the 2-year-old didn't speak, but you know, she accompanied the 4-year-old. So I said, does your mommy keep an eye on you? Who watches you when you're outside? Nobody. So anyway, she's taking me around and showing me the property, and I asked her if she did any hobbies, and she wanted to be a gymnast, but her mommy wouldn't let her do that, and the state wouldn't let her partake in any kind of activities. So anyway, this little girl kept saying over and over again she wanted to see her mommy. She wanted to go back to her life with her mother. She missed her mommy, and that if I could get her back together with her mother. So while I was a CASA, I had to supervise the visitation between her and her mother. And what I witnessed was a lot of interaction with the girls and their mom. They didn't seem afraid of their mother. They seemed like they were very comfortable with her. But I noticed that when I was there with the foster mom, she had called the little girl a pig, and the little girl drew a picture of a black hand to show me that she was being abused in her foster home. That part didn't get leaked out to the state, and of course I as an advocate couldn't really advocate for the child. After I was dismissed, because the woman who was the foster mom tried to use her own kid to get my son to talk in school, she went behind my back and tried to get me axed from the job. This bitch was also the coach of my daughter's softball team and had overnight sleepovers where my daughter said she was very, very, very mean to the girls. Used profanity, was very obnoxious. her own daughters were abused, and the boy had shared that if he didn't do well enough in sports that he was beaten. So anyway, yeah. So this was a real nice foster care system we had here in Oregon. So I didn't really get to advocate and really write what I wanted to. The state workers actually coaxed me into writing a report, and they wrote it, and they made me sign my name to it. I really couldn't live with the whole thing. We're not supposed to do any special favors or give rides, but one day they said it was okay for me to meet at the state office because we had no place to meet. And of course, listening to my session or whatever that was going on, they didn't like what Micah, the mother, was talking about. So what they said to me was, she's a meth addict, you're not supposed to be nice to her. You know, she's a horrible mother, she's a horrible human being. And they said this in the presence of a 4-year-old little girl. Meanwhile, we were talking about the situation she was in front of a 2-year-old who knew nothing of what we were saying and could understand anything that we were talking about. So with that said, that wasn't okay. But it was okay to say some really derogatory things about the mother in front of the 4-year-old. That day, she was very pregnant with her last baby, and it was raining out. And of course, we couldn't really get a chance to talk, you know, one-on-one privately without the state easing in on the conversation and manipulating everything. And if you didn't do things their way, they axed you. So I offered to give her a ride, knowing that I would be stepping down from the case soon. And I gave her a ride to the next location because it was pouring down rain. She needed it was only a few blocks away, and she was very pregnant, so I wasn't going to let her walk in the rain. So I gave her a ride, which is a no-no. But anyway, it's the human thing to do. And as I knew I was going to not stay on the case because I couldn't live with that decision of not being able to be a real advocate for those girls, I reached over and I said, you know what? You have a baby due around my birthday. And I asked her, I said, what are you going to name that baby? And she looked at me and she said, Faith. And I said, Micah, what is the state doing for you right now to help you get off your meth? She says, absolutely nothing, but they will take my baby once it's born. I cried, and then I prayed with her. And that woman held on to the baby Faith. She still didn't get her other 2 girls back. And they're in limbo with that same witchy witch woman that had them from the time they were real little, who was very abusive. And she was very, very abusive, mean lady. She coached girls softball. She was just a nasty, nasty liberal woman bitch. But you know what? She played the state game really well. And she's a big fat cow who refused to work and made her living off of housing lots of little kids and neglecting them. The house was dirty. It was complete chaos, and she wasn't a good mom to her own kids. And she had the nerve to sit there and tell me that I wasn't doing a good job on my case, okay? From the very get-go, she didn't like me because she just knew that I was going to be very thorough. What I didn't like, and I'm going to tell you this straight up, is that the state looks for people that really that don't be attached to the kids, that really doesn't give a rap. This sees it as a business. I remember the mother of this little girl liked her hair long, and I saw the little girl years later, and I noticed she got a haircut, and I said, oh, you got a pretty little haircut. She says, I don't really like it. Mommy likes it long, and so do I. She says, when are you going to let me see my mommy? And she remembered me after many, many years. And I say, I'm sorry about that. And I felt like I really failed her. And I wanted to say that, you know what, it really wasn't my fault. Because I really, really felt like that little girl would have been better off with her own real mother. Her own real mother got a job, she kept the baby, and she got her life together. And it's just a shame that the state didn't give this mother a second chance. And falsely, wrongly took those kids out of house, wrongfully under a jealous ex-girlfriend that made up false allegations and wrote a bunch of false things in the report. It's a big money-making business, people. And if you think for a single minute that the state is out there to do better, to make better kids, or to do anything or do right by those kids, they're only going to make more monsters like they made of that kid that shut up that school. And that is the God-honest truth from a former CASA, court-appointed special advocate who really cares about those kids. I took in a lot of kids that were living homeless that would stay in my house. And I have a big, big heart. And there are so many children that just went without food, that lived in my tree house on my property, that really didn't have a place and that were sleeping in their car. And I'll tell you, it is really disgusting, absolutely disgusting, that people sit there and know that these kids are hungry and they don't have a place to go, and they ignore them because they're grown, but they'll take small little beautiful blonde-haired, blue-eyed kids out of their homes just to make money off of the whole shebang, you know. And really, honestly, I know, without a fact, you know, just all rhyme or reason, that the biggest mistake that this mother made was she got with the wrong guy, and he was a horrible human being, and he was cheating on her, and it was a girlfriend of his that made up these allegations about her that were false. There was no sign in the doctor's reports or in the court reports that there was abuse on those kids. And that's the kind of shit that goes on behind the scenes. Now, I had a niece who was clearly abusing her kids, who was completely neglecting her kids, and it took years of her giving them drugs that they didn't need and all these horrible things and unsupervision and everything else before the children's services intervened. And then only when they did, given him to a police officer who hit him and abused him even worse than when he was having in his own home. But you know what? The system is very flawed, and I'm going to tell you the reason why. Because we do not have enough people out there to be foster parents. It's a difficult job. Nobody wants to take on damaged kids. And another thing, it's a big money-making business as well. And it's more money to be made off of those cute little babies that they take out of their homes, you know, and give them over. And they want to turn it over as fast as they can to take away and diminish the parental rights. You know, at the same time, a Mexican child will get free benefits, free food stamps, free daycare, free this, free that, and you won't help that poor single white mother. And that's the whole travesty of this, the whole injustice of this system. And so I would say stuff to the court-appointed, you know, special advocate. I would say, well, you know, you're training me about cultural differences. I said, you know, there's a kid that's 4 years old or 2 years old in diapers, walks out of the house in the middle of the night and goes to a food store and helps himself to the candy bar and crosses a major highway. You give the baby back to parent because you said, oh, that's a cultural tradition that Latino parents can abuse their kids and their toddlers can walk across the main highway, because in Mexico they could do that kind of stuff, and that's okay. But under hearsay allegations of an ex-girlfriend that's having an affair with an ex-guy friend or whatever, says that the mother hit the daughter, and there's no bruises and there's no marks and there's no nothing to say any different. And yet, under just allegations, you can take that child away from the home. Okay, you know, yeah, maybe you suspect that there's drugs involved or whatever, but that Latino parent, you don't sit there and have that same investigation on that mom who completely lets her 2-year-old loose in the middle of the night. And this is just like, it didn't happen just 1, 2, or 3 times. This was on a regular occasion. This baby was hungry, would get up in the middle of the night and just walk to the supermarket or whatever and help himself to the candy. And so that's a cultural right. So it was a very flawed system. We had a very big meth problem in Tillamook County, Oregon. Did anybody do anything to address that? Did they maybe find a spot for that pregnant woman in a rehab, you know, and committed her, saying, you know, look, we're going to take the baby away if you don't get into treatment now. You won't be able to see your kids if you don't get into treatment now. No, they didn't do anything. And meanwhile, you never know what kind of like problems that unborn child is going to have due to the exposure of drugs. So if you know somebody's abusing drugs, you don't just sit back there and passively do anything. They are so into killing babies and having injured babies than really getting to the problem. And because of how the law is regulated, they don't consider an unborn child a human being. And that's really fucked up. And that is really fucked up. And that is where we are failing in society, because people don't have hearts inside their bodies and soul. They are so clouded with law and ignorance, it's beyond me, that how can anybody say that baby with a heartbeat and breath that can live at 5 months along is not a child. So with that said, I think they're all full of shit. I think some of the most horrific criminals on earth work for the state agencies. And I don't think, and in God is honest, I don't think any of them have enough qualifications or skills or even social conscience that even do their jobs effectively and correctly. And they get volunteers just simply so they can manipulate the process, because you know what, I didn't find that the CASA program was even effective. And with that said, you know, that is why we have monsters like Nicholas Cruz. And that is why we fail our kids and our system, is because that system is a failed system. And no amount of money is going to make it right. Because you know what? They're not out there to do the right things. It's all about taking the child away from parent and not giving those parents the skills to succeed. And because if they really cared about the parent, they would do everything they could to keep the kids together with those parents. With that said, you guys think about that and have a great day. God bless.